very complicated plan, very prone to failure, and very, very wouldn't work, I think. We're back with Strange New Worlds, Episode 2. Season 1, of course. Children of the Comet. Strange New Worlds is beginning to feel not so strange. It's feeling familiar. Not so new. It's feeling old. And the worlds, well, we've been to 2 so far. So I guess, in that sense, it's properly billed as a show about new worlds. Discovering things has been sorely lacking in the last few years with regards to Star Trek. So I'm glad to see the Discovery is back. Not just in Strange New Worlds. I mean, Season 4 of Discovery, a little better. Let's just leave it at that. There's no other shows. There's just animated and this, and a little bit of Discovery. Sadly. Anyway, what is the comet? Who are the children? Why are they the children of the comet? Well, we're going to find out about that in a moment. For starters, this episode, because it is episode 2, some of the problems that were present in episode 1 that I was willing to gloss over, they're hanging around, and now it's harder to ignore. Things had time to set in. A lot of the concepts, big and small, tiny details, stuff like that, has had time to marinate in my brain. So I'd like to get that out of the way. First off, number 1, I've now kind of noticed that the uniforms do not have differently colored bands. Okay, see these bands here? They're colored a different color than the uniform, okay? And the reason you do that is so it's easily viewable, your rank, okay? We use these stripes to determine our rank. It's very important. In Strange New Worlds, if your uniform is red, say, the stripes are also red. They're just shiny. If your uniform is blue, your stripes are blue. It is totally inexplicable why you go back on a design idea that was so obviously correct, but we just need to uselessly reinvent things. If we ever needed evidence that we're reinventing things just for jokes, just for funnies, that's got to be it. I can see no other reason why you would think to make your rank harder to see. And I see painfully few people mentioning that. But it's like I said, it's marinated in my mind. My mind is sautéing in a pan. Time is the oil in which we fry, if you catch my drift. And now things are setting in, okay? The flavor is really baking down into the meat of my brain. This view screen they keep using in like the conference room, boardroom, whatever you want to call it, it's at a very odd angle. It's at like an acute angle to the floor. Like it's like you're looking at a screen right now. Just imagine if the screen you're viewing this on was tilted like this, and it's like, why am I seeing it like this? Go back and look at it in this episode if you have access to the episode. The room they keep going back to plan missions and whatnot. The screen is at an angle. It's like they were reusing Discovery sets, and that was a window, and they couldn't figure out how to rebuild it so that the screen would be straight like that. So they just said, keep the angle of the window, and we'll just put something else there. I mean, I can understand a little bit of a tilt, but this is crazy. Go back and look. Again, small things. We're not going to try to spend too long sweating the small things. Small things will come up, but we're going to be sweating it to the big things. And sweating it to the oldies. Because this is ostensibly TOS, those old starships. So without further ado, let's dig down. Let's dissect this episode. See what makes it tick. See what makes it die. This is Children of the Comet. Thankfully, we are in episodic storytelling. We didn't need to really know what happened last episode. However, we got a recap anyway, I think, which put a bad taste in my mouth. I don't want any more recaps. I don't want to hear anybody say last time on ever again. If I don't want to ever see that anymore. I'm done. I'm done. You've hurt me enough already. Stringing me along with a 12+ hour long movie that you needlessly chopped into little chunks and then called each chunk a different name for no reason. And the theme of this season is faith. The theme of this season is loss. Season-long thematic arcs. Guys, what was the theme of TOS Season 1? Nothing. Seasons shouldn't have themes. Episodes have themes. Anyway, that creeps up a little bit in this episode. The idea of Pre-Ordained Fate. We're having a party, a meet and greet. Pike wants to see what's going on with the regular people on the ship. One of them being Uhura, Cadet Uhura. She's tricked into going to this party in her dress uniform. Haha, funny, right? Everybody else is underdressed. And we see her dress uniform, and it just looks terrible. I don't know what they were thinking. This has got to be one of the worst dress uniforms I've ever seen. Granted, it's a cadet dress uniform. I don't know if that's different for this show, but it's got this bizarre angular cutout to the division color. It's horrible. It's overly busy. It clashes with everything else. Regardless, we're at this dinner party. Flavor dialogue that I don't need to go into, but Pike is laying it on a little thick with the charisma. Last episode, I think he hit the nail on the head. This episode, it's a little much. It's getting into the realm of a deodorant commercial, if you catch my drift. Fate gets brought up again. Pike, sadly, is still not over it. We're still clearly in Discovery Pike that I want to get away from. This idea of things being preordained, which is, of course, impossible. However, Uhura tells her backstory. Here we go. Here we go, guys. What's going to happen? Uhura has a tragic backstory. That's 2 for 2. The first episode, La'an reveals her tragic backstory, a sole survivor type story. This episode, Uhura, who we know and love, reveals her tragic backstory. Her parents died in some shuttlecraft accident. Just some shuttlecraft accident. Don't worry about it. But I'm holding on to that guilt. I'm the survivor. Why me? Why me? I'm not cut out for Starfleet. Give me a break. You guys did it again. You can't write anything without inserting a tragic story so that I'm tricked into liking them. You're guilt-tripping me into liking a character. You can't not like this character. Can't you see how much guilt they carry? Can't you see how sad they are? You need to like them now. Bull crap. I say nuts to that. Okay? You're not tricking me into liking Uhura, which you never had to do to begin with. You don't have to trick me into like a character I already knew. This doesn't feel like our Uhura. But it's not our Uhura yet. The one saving grace. Feels nothing like Uhura. None of the charm. None of the wit. None of the musical way of speaking. And we're going with the Kelvin Uhura here. Uhura in TOS and in the TOS films wasn't a particularly good linguist. They've confused communications with linguistics. Okay, this is since 2009. Handling all incoming audio traffic and handling outbound comms is a complicated thing, and you have to have the judgment to know what's important in the now. Okay? And you have to know how to deliver messages, how to put in codes, how to hide stuff. It's not super easy. And this perception with Kelvin and beyond Uhura was that her job was just answering a phone, which is not. I mean, if anyone has done it, it's like it's not. I can't just go do it now and have it work out right. I'll mess it up. Okay. Space is busy with noise. But now Uhura has to be this genius linguistic. And granted, to get on the Enterprise, you need to basically be a genius. But it's this idea of speaking a lot of languages is a Kelvin invention, we'll say. And in fact, in TOS, Uhura was not a great translator. She had trouble translating Klingon, for that matter. Hard to imagine this Uhura just forgetting all this in a few years. Time goes by in a flash. Things hit you hard. Time flies when you're having fun. Maybe you forget all the Klingon you knew. Yeah, okay. She mentions to Pike, I know 22 different dialects from my country and 30 other languages, something like that. It doesn't matter. She knows a lot of languages, which begs the question, what are these languages? The obvious question I would ask if I was Pike was what, is it how many of those languages are actually really complicated? People have this concept that some languages are easier to learn than others. So maybe she's stocking up on 20 really easy ones. I hate to burst her bubble for no reason, just to be a meanie head. But I would ask her, do you know Klingon? Do you know Andorian? Do you know Vulcan? It's, kind of, show me an example. How did you learn this? How does it work? But that doesn't happen. So I'm willing to take for granted that she is as smart as she says she is. That's fine. And that she knows a lot of languages that I believe should be complicated. We'll leave it at that. We're introduced to the character of Hemmer, who I thought was really cool, by the way. But Uhura stops him to try to help him cutting a carrot. And she says, I was trained by my parents or whatever to help people who were impaired or something like that. So she either looked at his eyes, recognized he was blind, or read his file. And I was thinking, well, that's not, well, maybe you were taught wrong. Granted, this is a human convention, and he is an Andorian, an Aenar specifically. I thought if someone was impaired, you give them their dignity to try on their own, and then only help them when they ask you. That's what I learned on Earth. Granted, this is an Earth-centric view, but it just seemed odd to me that Uhura would just instinctively try to help this blind person. She is a cadet. Maybe she's not up on exactly how to handle interspecies disability norms, we'll call it. It's a complicated and potentially touchy subject, so I'm just going to ignore it for now. Regardless, we've met Hemmer. He looks really cool. He catches a carrot, even though he's blind, but a little bit telepathic. Cool scene. We'll end it at that. Now, we're investigating this comet. Here's where the episode really goes to hell. And the first act of this episode is terrible. And I had to pause it a certain way through to just scratch my head and try to collect my thoughts. We're here to study this comet, okay? We have dinner. What I assume is dinner. I don't know if it's breakfast or dinner. That'll be important in a moment. In the middle of the festivities, we learn, there's something wrong with the comet. Captain, you should get up here and see this. So this comet we just happened to be studying, luckily ended up being significant for the plot. It turns out that this comet is going to impact this planet. So, before we know anything else, we're immediately deciding to change the trajectory of this comet so that it does not hit the planet. The very comet we were just here to study. If we were here to study it, why did we come out here all this way and not know its trajectory beforehand? We know the trajectory of a grain of sand floating through space for hundreds of years. We know where it's going to hit. We track billions, trillions of objects in space. The math is very clear on this. Things don't just happen very much in space unless a sentient being is involved, putting their thumb on the scales, so to speak. It's very odd that we got here without knowing the trajectory of this comet. Okay? And on top of that, we've decided to alter the trajectory of the comet, violating the Prime Directive that was a key part of last week's episode. Pike even says, we allow planets to develop on their own, but we also don't just let people die. That sentence cannot be said in Starfleet. It doesn't make sense. Yes, we've made mistakes with General Order 1 and the Prime Directive. We're not perfect. But a statement conjoining two impossible sides of one question doesn't compute. My immediate instinct was to let them die. I've let millions of people die. It wasn't my fault. Call it preordained. If something is going to happen without my involvement, from where I'm standing, I may as well call that preordained. It's not in the broadest sense, but for my purposes, it was something that was just going to happen. Okay? Just because we have these advanced tools, we are not here to play gods, nor are we the shepherds of the universe. Okay? It turns out a ship just warps out of nowhere, and it's revealed that this comet that we've landed on, well, it's called Mahanit, or Mahanit, and it is some sacred thing, and guess what? We just beamed people down to the surface because force fields came up when we tried to move it. How did we move it? Well, our first idea to move this comet, change its trajectory, was to throw torpedoes at it with ion engines attached to compensate for its rotation and then move it. Hemmer is standing right there, and I have input on this. He can come up with no better idea than to go with immediately what their suggestion was, even though he's the chief engineer and should know these things. And it is admittedly a very complicated plan, prone to failure, unnecessarily difficult. To go into every precise detail of why this is strange is beyond the scope of this review. However, ships have had tractor beams for a while now. Ships have had tractor beams since around the 2170s, something like that. This ship, when it was first commissioned, was one of the last ships that came equipped with a grappler. Last. So, this is giving an idea how old this ship is, really. It's been through about 3 refits, I think. Again, outside the scope of this review. My first instinct, for what it's worth, would be to put the Enterprise between the comet and the planet, and pull the comet on a tractor beam on the aft ventral section of the Enterprise, move it in a prograde direction that is perpendicular to the equator. So go prograde and then 1 notch perpendicular to the equator. Bring it as close to the equator as you can for the gravity assist, and pedal to the metal on the impulse drive. It's not that big, and by the way, the computer simulation seemed to indicate that it was going to hit the planet on an acute angle. Right, so that means it could have gotten an assist even from being bumped off the atmosphere. because when you're going that fast, you hit the atmosphere like a brick wall. So actually, everything was set up to help us in this, I think. Complicated engineering question that is not necessary for the flow of this episode. Just bringing it up. But our idea is complicated and gets more complicated. The alien on screen says, "We're the shepherds." And Mahanit, he refers to it as a him, by the way. Whoa. It's this special device that brings life, and we are preordained to save it and make sure it goes on its preordained path. So there is a conundrum. Okay, these aliens, they're not beholden to Prime Directive policies because they are obviously post-warp. The planet is, though. So we have this clashing. This comet is coming partially because of an alien species that is not subject to the Prime Directive. The planet is subject to the Prime Directive. But we were there, and we're trying to change the trajectory of the comet before we knew that. So we should not have been there to begin with. This is an episode that really should not have happened. Logically. So this is akin to stealing the car and then worrying about where you drove it. Doesn't matter. You already stole the car. Bring it back. I don't care if where you're going makes sense. The car is stolen. This episode is failing on its initial premise. And what's more, this could have been easily fixed with a few simple rewrites. The captain says, "We're going to have to fix this problem for them before breakfast. We'll get this done before breakfast. Ha ha ha." Did we just eat breakfast? What were we just eating? Why'd they bring up that line in an episode where we just ate something? Again, it doesn't matter, but it's just something I picked up on. Sam Kirk, Lan, Cadet Uhura, good luck on your first away mission, and Spock are down on the surface of this comet, trying to discover why it is as this force field. And they communicate with it through song, and every time this comes up, they think it's way more original than it really is. I've seen this a few times, just whistling to aliens, communicating through music. You know, music is derived from math. Math is a universal language. Haha. I don't know, it just fell flat for me. Pardon the pun. I feel like I've seen this in a few other incarnations of Star Trek. I can't quite put my finger on them, but I know I've seen it. Communicating through music, it's an old concept. It would have been cooler if we could communicate through just tapping on it or something, you know, or communicate with, maybe like a game. We play a game, you know, Move Along Home. What a great episode that was. So, it turns out that this song that Uhura was humming to herself at the beginning, and if a character is humming a song in modern Star Trek, guess what? It's important. It's important every time it happens. It was important in Star Trek Discovery Season 3, and it's important now. The song she was humming activates something inside this comet. Sam Kirk is almost dead on the floor because he was dumb and touched the egg thing. When you go inside an alien thing and you see a gigantic egg-shaped thing, don't touch it. That's a bad idea. Basically every time. Sam Kirk touched it, and he found out. And now he's on the floor. But he's not dead. And we all knew he couldn't die here. Wink, wink. They communicate with it long enough, and wow, we sang to it the correct song, I guess, and turned off its shields. What do we do now? We're not allowed to touch Mahanit. These aliens outgun us. So Pike, admittedly, has the good idea of, after a few pointless scenes of the ship flying around as if it's a tiny fighter, the Enterprise is what we would call a cruiser, which means its battles are mostly stationary. Sorry, that's just how we do it. It's not a shuttle. It's not a fighter. We don't need to see the Enterprise swerving around things. But that happens, and Pike decides, I'll stop, turn everything off, bring as close as you can to the comet, but leave me the view screen on and life support. They don't say leave the view screen on, but he asked to turn it on after he asked for all systems off, except for life support. Could have wrote a little sentence in there to make that make sense, but a tiny logical leap on behalf of the viewers is not that bad. It's a lot better than huge logical leaps we had in particular other seasons of Star Trek. The view screen turns on, and he says, listen, we're dead in the water here. If you don't help us, we're going to run into that comet, thereby touching it, which we've already done. Sorry about that, by the way. Can you help us? And they do, and they tractor beam them out. Yay, we're all friends now. But, Spock, do it. Spock is going around the comet, and he's shedding thermal energy through the shields of the shuttle to cause sublimation of the moisture inside the comet along a fault line to create a crack in it that would ideally produce a jet of gas that would alter its course. Very complicated plan, very prone to failure, and very, very wouldn't work, I think. I think this wouldn't work, but it does. And remember, Uhura happened to know this song by luck, happened to go down to the comet. Oh, I'll go on this away mission. Lucky, she was instrumental in saving it. A lot of stuff is based on luck, which I always hate. I don't like when luck is a necessary factor in a plot, because in my real life, that scares me. I want to eliminate luck. If anything, I want to have everything be 105% certain. We're doing this mission, and we know it can't fail. I'm not doing the mission unless I know it cannot fail. I hate luck. Get it out of here. And for the love of God, get the idea of faith out of here too. And fate for that matter. I don't need fate. Fate, it's not so different from luck when you think about it. So we're, quote, departing as friends, not as enemies. Hopefully next time you won't be so quick to judge someone else's faith. After Ortegas and Pike were calling these people zealots and crazy monks, which was very presumptuous, I might add, because we are this far out in space and we don't know if the shepherds are correct. What if they were literally correct? And this wasn't just based on a religion or mythology that they had. And that this asteroid, meteor, comet, I'm not an astro geologist. Geologist would not be the word because geo means earth. But you get my point. Maybe it really was supposed to hit this planet. It had a lot of water in it. We deflected it off its trajectory, but it was there long enough to leave some water behind, water vapor, permanently changing the ecology of this world. So, oops, we did affect the ecology of this world. Oops, we are effectively God beings to them now. Oops, we're just as bad as the shepherds were. Oops. Again, it's not the first time this happened. We're not so great at following our own rules, but I expect some effort. And, like I mentioned before, precedence for an error does not justify a future error. Okay? We can write this a little bit smarter, a little bit more accurate, and a little bit more thoughtful, but we tend not to. So, it turned out this comet knew we were going to do this because all this time it was transmitting a message to the Enterprise that you needed to break off this chunk, but the image it was showing of this chunk was the exact same shape as the chunk we just broke off, which is not possible randomly. So somehow this comet expected Spock to break off this piece. I hope we are not establishing the precedent that this season's events are preordained. I know it's a prequel, but having things be preordained to happen is dangerously close to a get out of jail free card for writers to just goof off and then just blame it. Oh, it was predestined to happen that way. I know it's crazy. I know it's contrived. But it had to happen. It was the will of the fate. And then we get our Star Trek ending, quintessential TOS style ending that I always love. The speech to another character while walking down the hallway. Hey, you did pretty good today. Except this is Spock talking to Uhura. And Spock, earlier in this episode, made mention of the fact that Uhura said she was not like Starfleet material, so to speak, and she was thinking of not being in Starfleet. Now Spock repeats the conversation, except he's like, you know what? We could not have won this mission without you. You were instrumental in saving our lives. The chances of us living were low. So I'm glad you're here. Hopefully you'll consider staying in Starfleet. Heartwarming. Made me happy. You love to see it. But, again, the broad ideas, not that bad. We're on point thematically. We're just having a few logical problems. This episode definitely needed a rewrite. I had high hopes for this one, but if you can tell by the way I'm reviewing it, I didn't actually like it quite as much as the past one. I've seen many people liking this more than the first one, but I feel the opposite. Musically, there's not much going on. The TOS theme song, Stinger, could have played a few times, but it was sorely lacking in a few key moments where it needed it. Philosophically, again, we're getting into the idea of fate, but I prefer to look at this from Uhura's point of view, since this is clearly her episode. It's about believing in yourself. It's about breaking out of your shell. It's about being encouraged. Sam Kirk encourages her. He's blunt, but he's on point. Sam Kirk is saying, listen, I know you're a cadet, but we need to succeed now. Okay, we cannot fail. Can you do it? You take the cadet, you put them on the spot, you expose them to real danger, and they learn and grow like a muscle. We need to flex our muscle to make the muscle bigger. And that's what we did with Uhura this episode. So, philosophically, it's delivering a heartwarming message to me about personal growth, about challenging yourself, about believing in yourself. So that gets an okay from me. So we're good on that, but graphically, what we were seeing on screen, a little muddled, a little blurry, a little dark. Again, the alien ship. I love alien ships, and Star Trek franchise has been fantastic in that front. But as of lately, a lot of these ships just kind of look like a mess of metal. I'm looking at you, Nero. That literally was a mess of metal. It was unique in how messy it was. Now these ships look like they were designed in about 5 minutes. They don't look built per se. They just look like a big mess of trusses and God knows what. So I was disappointed by the alien ship designs, as well as our Enterprise looking dark and dirty. I appreciate the effort with the Aztec painting. I won't be explaining what Aztec here, you can look that up. But Aztec is a key design principle in creating the surface material of ships in Star Trek since the motion picture. In the motion picture, when they did the Aztecing, they were careful not to make it look dark, but to make it look shiny and pearl-esque, as well as having lots of details hidden on the surface that reveal themselves when at a certain angle to the light. Very important. This Enterprise, it has the Aztecing, but it's so dim, it's so dark. Maybe just light it better. It's certainly an improvement. Discovery was very dark. I could barely see what was happening. And I need to see my ships. I like seeing them. Self-illuminate them, put them closer to the sun, anything you have to do. If you are in orbit and you are in the sun side of an orbit, guess what? In real life, the ships are blindingly bright. You almost can't look at them. Believe me, I know. So that was Children of the Comet. I guess the Children of the Comet were the people on the planet, the Deleb, who now have access to water, and they're thereby offspring of the planet, even though we did it. It was our fault. It was Starfleet's fault this happened. We influenced the development of this planet. I hope nobody reports that. Oh well. And yes, this has happened before. I need to keep pointing that out so people don't try to nail me to the wall saying, oh, well, they did it in TOS all this time. I know. Okay? That's not the point. Okay? One thing I'd like to mention is that hyposprays hurt now. I mean, I've taken a lot of hyposprays and they ain't never hurt me. But Nurse Chapel drives one right into Uhura's head and she goes, ow, and winces from it. It ain't supposed to hurt. Mentioned in this episode literally is the fact that Nurse Chapel is, quote, flirting with Spock. We've seen it before technically. In TOS, if you look really close, there's like a dynamic between Uhura, Spock, and Chapel. But it's very, especially with Uhura and Spock, it's very faint. And it was brought to the surface in Kelvin in a big way that I don't know if I really liked. But Chapel was always kind of flirtatious with Spock. Perhaps she was like that with everybody. But they do point it out in this episode. By the way, I find Nurse Chapel to just be fun in this show so far. She's just playful. I don't know. I like it when characters are just happy for no reason. Ortega seems happy for no reason. Despite the bizarre haircut, I kept looking at her hair and imagining I was going to be slipping my foot into it. It looked like a shoe. Some type of strange flip-flop. I'm not really down with it. Maybe just shave your head entirely. Ilea looked good with a shaved head. Maybe Ortegas will. Not to impose. Of course, she can just cut her hair however she wants. Yeah, it's sometimes things are just distracting though. Like Hemmer being a Discovery-style Andorian and having weird ridges all over his head. Does anyone know why that is? I don't know why we need to just reinvent the wheel every time we see a known alien. By the way, it's been a long time since we've seen a Klingon. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, say no more. That was Children of the Comet. I didn't like it as much as the previous one. I also didn't really hate it. Again, a few rewrites could have really saved this episode. So I'm going to give this one a 5. It's just okay. Take it or leave it. Both of these Strange New Worlds episodes, to me, barely rise to the level of an okay TOS episode, honestly. It just barely hits okay TOS levels. No one's really going to be remembering these episodes 50 plus years from now. And no one's going to be remembering Yahtzee a year from now. In your time. Yahtzee is brought up in this episode. Sam Kirk says that this thing lit up. Oh, Yahtzee? I didn't know what Yahtzee was. Nobody on the ship knew what Yahtzee was. A lot of people on the ship are from Earth, and we didn't know this ancient Earth game of Yahtzee, so I had to look it up. I guess it's some board game where some bubble-shaped thing lights up or bops and the little object inside rotates around. I don't know. Do you know what Yahtzee is? This episode, it feels out of order. If you've watched this episode, bear with me. Could the dinner scene have not have been at the end? And then instead of going to this pre-warp planet, we should have gone to a planet that had just entered the Federation, and this comet was going to destroy them. And they knew about this comet for years, so fast-tracked introduction into the Federation of Planets. So this was like the Enterprise's sign of good faith when they just entered the Federation. Doesn't that kind of fix the plot? Like, it wasn't that hard to just write that. I just came up with it now. And the reason you put the dinner scene at the end is so that we're not playing around at the beginning of the mission. You put the playing scene at the beginning, it feels like discovering the comet had something special about it was an accident. So the tone of it makes it feel like the Enterprise's sensors, its scientists, are either stupid or broken. You know, like, we should have been on the ball with that comet from the word go, and then put playtime at the end. I think it would really help the tone of the episode too. And maybe the alien could have came aboard too and had dinner as well. After all, we are parting as friends. Sorry for touching your mahanit. Nobody likes having their mahanit touched. Am I right, guys? Pike, by the way, says, and for the record, we didn't touch it. Wrong. You guys touched it a lot. You beam people down to the surface, and a second before Pike said that, you can see Spock's shuttle grinding against a section of it as he's heating up a fracture to cause it to not deorbit. It's just a lie. Lots of sentences from Pike are just a lie in themselves, like me saying, this statement is false. It's just these sentences that can't work. We just saw Spock touch the comet. For the record, we didn't touch it. We don't interfere in plants' developments, but we also don't just let people die. Huh? They don't really fit together right. There's something about that doesn't seem right. Stretching the truth, stretching logic. That's why this episode is just an okay, whatever. Hemmer was cool. We had to ruin Uhura. We had to give Uhura a sad backstory. We're worried that the viewers won't care about Uhura. Let's give her a sad backstory. These people, one step forward, two steps back. I guess the usual cadre of people who write these episodes, we can't really expect much more from them. They try. They'll sometimes bait and switch you. They'll act like they've learned. But we're going back to this abusive relationship. And it's really got me, especially with this episode, it's really got me rethinking a few things as to the quality of the upcoming Star Trek Strange New Worlds episodes. How can these people possibly learn not to keep creating these tragic backstories, not to keep having this insane discovery dialogue, not to keep having this Kelvin-style action? How could we expect them to learn, right? Your ideas come from your brain. Your brain is a toolbox. You cannot solve a problem using the wrong tools. You have to relearn. You have to accept you were wrong, have the humility to relearn, and come back with new tools in the mind. You cannot fix the problem using the old tools. These people bring a toolbox to a picnic. It ain't gonna work. But I hate to be so dour. Let's all try to look forward to the next one. I'm Lieutenant Mark, and I'm going to see you next week. Mark out.